Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the SHAIR podcast. And today we have Amberly Lago joining us on the show. And at 38 years old, Amberly was a personal trainer, avid runner, and sponsored by Nike. However, she never expected her life to turn upside down when she was hit by an SUV driving her motorcycle. She underwent 34 surgeries to save her leg from amputation. Diagnosed with an incurable disease dubbed the suicide disease, she lost her business, self-confidence, and dealing with chronic pain in her leg quickly spiraled into addiction. Too scared to live, too scared to die, and a flicker of determination left, Amberly asked herself if she was going to sit back and play the victim or choose to be resilient and face unresolved trauma, past sexual abuse, and push forward to heal from chronic pain. Today, Amberly Lago is a health and wellness coach, a TEDx speaker, and a leading expert in the field of resilience and transformation. She is the best-selling author of True Grit and Grace and empowers people all around the world by sharing how she turned a tragedy into triumph. And today we dive headfirst into Amberly's story. But before we dive into Amberly's story, be sure to click subscribe to the SHAIR Podcast YouTube channel below. Check out the SHAIR Podcast website where you can learn more about the SRC, the SHAIR recovery community, and also make sure to check out omarpinto.com if you want to learn more about one-on-one coaching with me. And so now, without further ado, let's dive into today's episode with Amberly Lago. Hey, Amberly, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Omar. Good to be here.
Yes, I'm super excited to have you on the show. How you feeling today?
I'm excited to see you and get to see your face and feel your energy through the screen, actually.
All the way from Costa Rica.
I got that.
Good. This is going to be fun. It's going to be fun. All right. So, folks, quick intro. First of all, today we have Amberly Lago joining us on the show. And at age 38, her life was turned completely upside down. Hit by an SUV, recovered from 34 surgeries to save her leg from amputation. Diagnosed with an incurable disease dubbed the suicide disease. And as a result, lost her business and lost her self-confidence. She spiraled down into depression because of her chronic pain and nothing worked. Have you ever felt so hopeless and stuck you wanted to give up? Well, that was where Amberly was. Then one night, she was lying in her hospital bed and her life flashed before her eyes. She remembered what her grandfather had said to her once. You've got a shovel in your hands. You can either lean on it and pray for a hole, or you can start digging. And right then and there, she realized she had a choice. She could either give up and give into the pain or start digging, start fighting, and create something positive out of her circumstances. Sound about right, Amberly?
Yeah. My grandfather would be so proud right now.
It's a good
Papa.
man. Papa. All right, good. So let's dive in. There's a lot there. But first of all, let's find out a little bit about who you are today. So what does your normal daily routine look like, Amberly?
Oh, it's full. I'm so grateful for the life that I have today because there was a time when it was really dark and not much was left in it. And today I have a full life and I get to be present and a sober mom and a wife and get to now when we're in this pandemic, I'm still doing book clubs. So I'm popping into Zoom sessions for my book, True Grit and Grace. And I've started my podcast a couple of months ago. And then even though speaking, the conferences, my favorite thing about the conferences was the connection with people. And even though those events have been canceled, we've been kind of pivoting and doing them virtually instead. So it's not the same as getting to hug somebody in person, but I'm grateful that we still have ways to communicate and connect with other people. So my day's been pretty full with training clients and organizing my online course as well.
So, and it's appropriate. This time that has forced us all to make radical changes in our lives, in our daily routine, in our businesses. And so that's one thing. So like myself, it seems like you've adjusted quite well.
Well,
You
some
know.
days. Yesterday was pretty crappy. But yeah, it's, at first I was just like in hustle mode.
Mhm.
And I think because um, I have a regular routine every day to keep me grounded as much as possible. So no matter what, no matter if I'm traveling, no matter if I'm on vacation, no matter if I have a day off, no matter if I have the busiest day of my life, I always start my day off with a prayer before my feet hit the ground. I have a morning ritual where I have a gratitude practice. So I not only write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, but I also believe accountability is really important. So I check in with my sponsor every single day, and I take a screenshot of something I've read out of either a spiritual book or a self-development book and send it to her and tell her what I'm grateful for. And she does the same thing for me. And I think by starting your day that way, and then moving my body, even though I don't feel like sometimes working out, I know how that changes the way I feel. And it has really saved me so many times. Moving your body moves your mindset. So by starting out with those things, I'm going to have a better day. And so through this time, through this pandemic, those things haven't stopped. They've changed a bit and how I've done them. Like I really miss the gym, but we quickly turned our garage into a little workout area. And I've been doing everything from lifting detergent bottles to using a skateboard to do hamstring curls to using a rope to get cardio, like anything I can do just to move my body. So I think those things help you. So when something does come up that is definitely not a part of the plan, it helps you navigate your way through those circumstances a little bit easier.
Perfect. Perfect. Beautiful. So, and that's why I asked. Ultimately, we got to that morning routine. But I'm curious as to I believe that the coronavirus is a cosmic wake up call for all of humanity to reassess their values. Take
Hmm.
a look take a look at themselves, take a look at their life, take a look at their direction, take a look at their purpose. Um how do you feel?
Well, I feel I feel exactly like you in that. I also feel that I was given a taste of this experience, what people are going through. Um, this is on a global level, but for
Mhm.
me, after my motorcycle accident, I was completely, the rug was pulled out from underneath me. My world stopped. I was no longer able to work. I went into financial debt. We had a lien on our house. I did not know how to cope with what I was going through because my only tool that I really had at that time was running and my being an athlete.
Mm.
And so anytime I had fear or depression or anxiety, I would just go for a run. And now that was taken away. And I was pretty much shackled to a hospital bed. And so I think a lot of people at this time are having a lot of fears come up. They're suddenly everything stopped and they're able to look at their priorities, and they're also able to look at habits in their life that maybe are good habits and some that maybe aren't so good. And so I think that it is a wonderful time, as hard as it is, to look at what your priorities are. Like, I think that everything that we do is either helping us or hurting us. It's either moving us closer to where we want to be or it's pushing us further away. And that is whether it be anything, whether it's the food we're eating, whether it's the people we're hanging out with, whether it's what we're consuming on the news or social media, all those things. It's a great opportunity for us to look and go, okay, how can I come out of this being somebody I'm really proud of, being the best version? Am I going to sit back and play the victim, Or am I going to go, okay, I'm going to show my children how to be resilient and give them the tools so they can grow up and be resilient? Or am I going to be an example of how to be defeated? And my children are my biggest inspirations, and I always want to set a good example for them. And whether we think they're watching us or not, they are like sponges and they're picking up on
Hmm.
everything we do.
This is so important. So important. Lot there. So much there. Really good stuff. And really this idea of really recognizing, and I know that feeling too, recognizing that I've already had a coronavirus experience. Like I've already been there. Right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel as though, and I hear this from a lot of the people that I'm connected with, I feel as though I've been preparing for this my whole life. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have already, there's people out there that are struggling with isolation and fear and uncertainty. And I lived in that for years in the depths of my addictions. It wasn't a couple of weeks,
Exactly.
it was years before
Mm-hmm.
I found my way out of it. And so this feels like, like I'm prepared for it. So, with that being said, there is a big component for me and one of the greatest gifts that recovery gave me was my ability to reestablish my spiritual connection. Because prior to recovery, I had completely disconnected. What is your
Mm-hmm.
experience, or what is your beliefs when it comes to your spiritual connection to spirituality? How important is that, and how do you maintain it?
Well, I grew up in Texas in the Bible Belt where it was a different kind of spiritual experience. It was a
Mm.
more of a religious thing where you went to church every Sunday. And if you didn't, you better be on your deathbed. There was no reason that you would skip Sunday school. But I always felt a little bit different. Like I didn't feel exactly the same. I felt like I had my own connection, my own like personal connection with God. And when I went through a horrible divorce, I married a man who I didn't know at the time because this was before I was drinking. I had no idea he was an alcoholic and an addict, and it got really bad. And when we went through this horrible divorce, I like made a deal with God. I was like, you give me custody of my child because he doesn't know how to change a diaper, and then we'll still be good. And I learned it doesn't work like that.
No.
And I was so caught up into, well, I'm running the show. Like I've had to figure out how to do everything on my own and I got this. And for a long time, I really turned my back on God. Like I just didn't really have that strong connection. And then after I went through my accident and I started drinking for relief, for pain relief, like self medicating, I was like at a point where I didn't want to live, but I was too scared to die. And I needed something bigger than me to believe in. And as soon as I started, I believe that's what pulled me through and pulled me out of that dark spot in my life was that little bit of light that was left in me. And I realized, we're never alone. God is, or you want to say, I call my higher power God, whether you want to say higher power, God, whatever that may be for you, is always there waiting for us. But we have to be willing to let them run the show. And so that was really the beginning of my recovery journey when I realized that I wasn't alone, that I didn't have to do it alone, and I could turn it over and I could ask for help. And so I start out every day and look, I get caught up in time still where I'm in like, I got to get this done. I got to do this. I got to do it my way. And then I have to remind myself, no, I need to pray about this. I need to ask God to come. I mean, even before we started interviewing, I was like, please God, just come and speak through me, guide me. And every morning I say a prayer. If I can't think of the right words, then I say a morning prayer that's already written out for me. It's typed up and it's easy. And I say a nightly prayer. And it's really, I think I would not be able to stay sober if I didn't have that higher power and that connection.
So many parallels. I love asking that question because it's so important. And most of the time when we've reconnected with our higher power, we've reconnected spiritually, and we've been able to heal from so much of the trauma associated with either religion or spirituality or whatever negative experience we have. When we're able to reconnect, it is truly the battery that
Mm-hmm.
runs the car. Like, it really, once you connect and once you plug in, you realize, like you just said, I am not alone. And I always like to say, hey, with all the things that happened to me when it came to religion and spirituality, what I came to recognize the most was that God was getting a bad rap. Like, I was blaming God for the experiences that I was having here on earth, and it had nothing to do with him. He was
Mm-hmm.
always there for me because, like
Mm-hmm.
you say, there was that moment where I had lost all hope, and I prayed to go somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I knew he was there, because I wasn't making deals anymore. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
negotiating. I was coming from a place of honesty and truth and humility and saying, I need help and I can't
Yes.
do this, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And then these opportunities started to present themselves, and I chose to say yes. And I think that it's an important conversation to have. So let's talk a little bit about your experiences with drugs and alcohol. So first, tell me how old you were the first time you drank or used drugs and how they made you feel.
Well, thank goodness I never did drugs. I mean, I had prescription medication after my surgeries, but I always had a healthy fear of doing drugs. I don't know, though that scared me. And I had friends that even smoked pot and stuff like that, and that even scared me. But I had my first drink. I think I had one of my friends, I think I was in 8th grade or maybe 8th grade, somewhere right before I was a freshman. One of my friends had a wine cooler and a Dixie cup and let me taste it. And I remember drinking that and thinking, wow, why do I feel so funny? What is this? And I that's all I drank, and it was enough to make me feel out of control. And it was a little bit scary. So it wasn't like, oh, this is good, I want to keep doing this. And so I didn't drink a lot. Like, of course, when I turned 21, I was like, oh, I've got a license to go to a bar now. Let's go to a bar. And I got really plastered, but I was so busy and focused on my career and working so hard. I had a lot of friends that were going to the bars and I was collecting their tips. I had to keep a roof over my head. I was really going after my dreams. And so I really wasn't a big drinker, never much of a partier. I was just like hustle, moved out to California and was working 4 jobs within the first 2 weeks that I lived here. Um, but then, as I got older, I thought, oh, wow, this wine is good. But I also had seen some alcoholism in my family, and I thought, oh, well, I'm so different. That'll never happen to me. I will be so opposite from that. And so my default was I would run. I was an athlete. I would, if I felt bad, I would do something to make me feel better. In school, that was make straight A's, or I became the overachiever. But when I
Mm.
really started drinking was after my accident. When I was stuck, I couldn't run for my outlet, and I was stuck with all these emotions that I had never dealt with, from sexual abuse as a child from my stepfather, from a horrible divorce from my ex-husband who was an addict, from just being mugged, from all these things that created such trauma in my life. And I just ran. I literally ran from it. And now all of a sudden it was right in my face. And I was trying all kinds of treatments for this nerve disease I was diagnosed with called complex regional pain syndrome. And I had had injuries as an athlete, and I thought, well, I can get through this. And when I was diagnosed with this disease and they said, there's no cure, you're going to be in the most pain of your life for the rest of your life. This isn't going away. In fact, you need to go get back in your wheelchair. And I was like, well, for how long? And they said, forever. I was devastated. Oh, what a cutie. I see your cat. And so it was at that moment when I tried a spinal stimulator. I tried ketamine infusions. Now, I had never done a drug in my life. Now, all of a sudden, I'm being induced with ketamine as a way to reboot my nervous system. I was on 11 different prescriptions. I was at the time taking 73 homeopathic pills a day. I was trying everything to get rid of my pain, and nothing was working. And I remember the day I had a glass of wine and I thought, oh, wow, well, why didn't the doctors just tell me to drink for my pain? Because it helped not only with my physical pain, but it also helped me stuff those feelings of, I'd lost my self-confidence, of I didn't feel worthy anymore. My worthiness was all based on what I could provide. And now I'm all scarred up. My leg is deformed. I lost my career. So it helped me stuff all those feelings down. And I remember thinking, I've been in the fitness and wellness industry for 22 years. And I remember thinking, well, this can't be healthy. This is not the right thing to do. I already knew in my gut that it wasn't the right thing to do, but I was like, well, but if this is what works, I guess I'll have to do this every day. And as we all know, that worked until it didn't. And my life came spiraling down and my world got smaller and smaller. And by the way, my husband is a lieutenant commander with the California Highway Patrol. And I was sneaking my drinking from everyone, including him. And that takes a lot of skill to sneak your drinking. And of course, I wasn't sneaking it as well as I thought I was, but I tried.
We never
And oh my gosh, it's
we
crazy.
try. Ah. So much there. But really, one of my questions was going to be, especially after we were talking about the coronavirus, and you talk about how you feel as though you'd already experienced that when you got into your accident. So you've been running for a long time.
I ran my whole life.
Ran your whole life. And you were forced to go inward. So there you are in the hospital, and I can't go running. I can't get away from anything. I'm there with myself in a hospital room, in isolation, in quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to process. I'm not, I have to process, or I have to numb. It's one of the two. So I'm either going to numb this or I'm going to process. What was the process or the processing? What did that look like? And when did you start? Like, I'm sure for a while there was a lot of fear and trepidation from the trauma. When did you allow yourself to start processing?
Well, when it got really bad was I had started training clients again, and my pain just escalated. I ended up getting an infection and going in ICU, and the doctors were like, you can't keep pushing your body. I was ignoring my body so much that I had a kidney stone that I was passing, and it hurt, but it was the first time that it hurt so bad that my leg didn't hurt. And my thought process was, oh, this is great. I don't have to walk with a limp. I can walk
Wow.
normal. And so I was ignoring my body so much that started going in convulsions, and I went into my husband dropped me off at the ER, and I had to call him back, and I said, hey, they're admitting me. They're putting me in ICU. They tell me I'm dying. I went septic. And it was at that point that I really got scared. And I thought, oh my God, I really need help. My liver enzymes were elevated like 300 times the normal level.
Wow.
And my body was basically shutting down. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to do something different. And it was that gift of desperation, I think, that was like, I need help. And I reached out to one of my former clients who I knew she was in recovery. And I was like, I think I've got a problem. And man, that I had so much shame behind there. So I had started drinking to try to numb out that shame,
Mm-hmm.
which caused even more shame. And so I don't think that we can just keep stuffing down. You know, I was taught most of my childhood to suck it up, and
Mm-hmm.
or as we say in Texas, cowgirl up, which basically means pull up your bootstraps and suck it up. And suck it up works for a while to help you have that grit to get through stuff. But until you really go through that process and peel back those layers of trauma or hurt, or where those feelings are coming from, or the reason why you're having to drink to numb out, is when I feel like you can get through those hard times. And when it really happened for me was I was in the middle of writing my book. And I think writing is so healing. But man, it nearly took me down, because I had just stopped training a lot of my clients because of the pain and getting out of the hospital. I was trying to finish my book. So talk about sitting in it and then seeing it, writing it, and experiencing all those
Mm-hmm.
emotions
Mm-hmm.
again was when it got really bad. And so, um, but it wasn't until I had a friend of mine ask me about my drinking that I thought, oh my God, the gig is up. Like, somebody noticed. And I just broke down in tears, and I was like, yeah, I need help. And that process of dealing with the emotions, and I Googled a 12-step program, because I was like, I know I can't do this on my own. I've tried to stop, and nothing's working. I, I'm gonna, I've got to Google something. Thank God for Google. And then I went from sneaking my drinking to sneaking going to recovery. So when I could go, when, my daughter was in school, when my husband was at work, and it was the scariest thing I've ever done. And scarier than any of those surgeries, scarier than, because I had so much shame and I was so scared to walk into a place where I felt like, oh my gosh, like, what if somebody recognizes me? And it's like, oh my God, we're all there for the same reason. But then, once you start to hear people that are experiencing and going through similar things as you, it's like I was given the gift of hope. And so that is what really changed my life, was just being given that. Like, I had a 1% chance of saving my leg from amputation, and that got me through those first 34 surgeries. Well, then I lost some hope again. And going in and knowing that other people had been through similar experiences as me, and they now had a life of joy, that was that little glimmer of hope I needed to keep, sober and keep moving forward.
There is this so much addiction here, right? And when we talk about addiction in the sense of, we have to really clearly define what that means for the individual, right? So there is this the addiction to success and accomplishments and achieving, being the
Mm-hmm.
best. It is a coping mechanism. It is a way for me to escape from the reality of the trauma that lives within, resides within me. So I'm constantly moving from one accomplishment to the next until I'm forced. And by the way, your clients, how do you, what is it that you do?
Well, at the time I was a fitness trainer and had a
Fitness trainer,
fitness company for 22 years, but for the past 8 years, it's been online coaching.
online coaching. Okay.
Hmm.
So there, and you, how long ago did you write the book?
It was published 2 years ago.
Okay. So right in the middle of your recovery. And so you get to this point. Well, first, before I get to that question, what was the inspiration for writing the book? And what was, and give us the title again.
It's called True Grit and Grace, Turning Tragedy into Triumph. And I really wanted to, my sincere wish was if I could write it and give someone the hope that was given to me. And so I thought, if I can write this book and have even one person read it, and it can give them the inspiration to not give up and to get through those hard times and that adversity, then it gives my pain purpose. And so that was my main motivation in writing the book.
Okay. So now I want to get you to that moment, because this is what happens. You know this, if you're a coach, the objective is to get there. Okay. The what is preventing me from being authentic? What's preventing me from having peace? What's preventing me from healing is this story that I've been telling myself. And so here I am writing my story, telling my story, and I get to this moment where I have this breakthrough right in the middle of my writing. What was that moment? What was that? What was
being
that?
in
What was that
being in
memory?
acceptance being in acceptance, because I did not want to. I was in denial. I didn't want to accept that, my identity was, I was sponsored by Nike. I
Mhm.
had a fitness career. I didn't do fitness training as a hobby. I had trainers that worked for me. It was my business. My whole life, I had done fitness videos. Before that, I was a professional dancer and did music videos and traveled across the world as a dancer. And now all of a sudden, my identity is completely what? I didn't know. It's certainly, I did not want to accept that it was going to be a life of pain. And so the moment when I thought, okay, this is it. These are the cards I've been dealt. I've got to figure out how to love myself through it, accept what's going on in my life so I can take some action steps to move forward. I can either keep going down that road of despair, or I can fight to have the best life possible and show my children how you overcome adversity.
So let's talk about that adversity, because that's what I'm trying to get, right? So this whole Nike, this sponsored by Nike and personal trainer and hyper successful, it's a mask. It's an identity that I've created to mask this trauma. Were you able to resolve that trauma? What was the trauma that finally surfaced that you were able to look at in the
Well,
face?
there was so much from, sexual abuse from my stepfather. There was physical abuse from the ex-husband, and verbal abuse, and just, horrible relationships. And then, we all go through, not no one's childhood is perfect, but there was a lot of crappy things that happened. And so being able to look at that and accept it and have forgiveness to move forward. But I think that on top of now having to look down at my legs that were my source of living, I was a walking billboard for my company. I was known and this is shallow. I know this is shallow. This was all ego. I was known for being, the fastest runner. I set a state record in Texas. All these things didn't matter anymore because now I look down and I'm completely scarred from the hips down. My ankle's fused. My leg is all metal. My foot's metal. It's fused. I had another surgery last week. And so that's why you keep seeing me look down, because I've noticed that my foot is oozing a little bit, not to gross you out, but I'm just used to this sort of thing. But being in acceptance, I was on the phone yesterday with my dad, and he goes, well, you didn't tell me you were having another surgery. And I was like, well, it wasn't really planned, and it's not one that I count because they didn't have to put me under anesthesia. Now I'm just like, can you numb it so I don't have to go under anesthesia and don't have drugs in my system, and I can just have whatever cut out and keep moving. And my dad said, well, why do you have an infection? And I said, well, Dad, my leg is compromised. All the femoral artery was severed, and I'm lucky to have the leg. And so there's the circulation's not what it was. And so if I get a little cut, it can turn into an infection, and the hardware, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, how are you going to live like this? How are you going to go on? And I thought, because I have the tools to grab that shovel and dig deep, and I have a toolbox. And if my prayer, saying the prayer is not helping me exactly how I need it that day, like I'm not feeling it, then I really focus on my gratitude, and then I try prayer again. Then I reach for my community and say, hey, I need to share something with you, and I need to feel that support of the community. And then I'm like, okay, I have to focus on my why. What is my why? What is going to give me the passion and perseverance to keep moving forward? And then I have to go, okay, I need to rest to be resilient. And so I think it's so important to have all these tools, because what works for me might not work tomorrow, but I can try it again the next day. And what works for me might not work for you, but as long as we're sharing with each other and in connection and community, then we can come together and share those tools, and we can all be better.
What did you discover was your biggest limiting belief?
I think probably my biggest limiting belief, well, I had a really imposter syndrome, like, oh my gosh, why am I here? Well, okay, so to give you an example, there was a lot, I had to have a heart to heart with my husband when I was writing the book, because I felt like I didn't, he was like, sure, you want to write a book? Yeah, we'll see about that. Then I'm like, I have a publisher that wants my book. And he's like, you have a publisher that wants your book? And I'm like, yeah, I got a publisher. Then I call him up and I'm like, hey, NBC called and Megyn Kelly wants to interview me on the Today Show. And he's like, what? Well, you're on your own, man. You're flying to New York on your own, And then I was like, okay, I'm Megyn Kelly. I want to talk to her. And then he called me back and he was like, hey, that's actually pretty cool. I already felt like, why would Megyn Kelly want to talk to me? I'm not worthy enough. Or, one of my first, I remember I got asked to do a TED Talk where you basically have to share the most important message of your life, and you've got 14 minutes to do it. Well, all the other speakers had PhDs, or they were, CEOs of company or presidents or blah, blah, blah. And then there was me. And my husband's looking through the website and he's like, wow, I know they don't like to promote books or anything, but do you think they could add that you're an author at least, like something? And so I called the curator and I was like, hey, I really hate to ask this, but I don't really have a title on there. Is there any way you could give me a title? My husband brought that up and she goes, wait a minute. Do you mean to tell me that he is giving you a hard time because you don't have PhD after your name? And I'm like, well, I'm the only one that's not a doctor, and I'm speaking to a bunch of scientists. So I had major imposter syndrome. She goes, you know what? You have a PhD in heart. And that's why we're having you at this talk. And so I think that as long as you have like that passion in your heart and you're coming from a good heart, that comes across and it helps you to believe in yourself and believe in your message. And sometimes it helps if you have somebody that shows you they believe in you, because it helps you believe in yourself. And so I always try, when I see somebody that I'm like, man, I love their message, I love what they're doing, I believe in them, I make sure I let them know, man, I believe in you, because sometimes that can change somebody's life.
It's so, I mean, this, just to emphasize the importance of having the right people in your life.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest challenges that so many of my clients face is, the imposter syndrome and this idea that I've got to figure it all out on my own, that I don't
Mm-hmm.
have help, that I can't lean on somebody. I don't have the community. I'll ask them, tell me a little bit about your community, your network. And it's like, well, that's one of the things I want to work on. And it's one of the most important things, because so many of us need someone else to believe in us before we can believe in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do not have the right support network, you're just never going to hear it. You're just never, the words, I believe in you and you can do it, as for some people would think is hokey, is probably the most important thing we need to hear, because we never heard it.
Well, I remember after my motorcycle accident, the first doctor that believed in me, because I had doctors say there's no hope. Your leg is basically like a war wound. We have to amputate. And I was transferred to Cedars, and this doctor was like, well, we're going to try. We're going to go in there. We're going to see what we can do. And when I had my first doctor's visit with the guy who put my femoral artery back together, he looked at me and he said, Kay, when you're healed up from this, I want you to save me a dance. And that just gave me hope, like, oh my gosh, he thinks I can dance again. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, that gives me a goal. I'm going to get through this so I can dance with him again. And it's those little things that make such a big difference.
Oh, wow. We hear that in recovery too. We'll love you until you learn to love yourself. And this is no
Mm-hmm.
different. We'll believe in you until you can believe in yourself. And I mean, that's where we come from. And at least the people that I've been surrounded with, is this inability to believe in ourselves, inability to have hope that we can overcome, that it's going to work for us, that we're not different, we're not special in a negative way. Because I think we're all different and we're all special in a positive way. But, we just seem to find ourselves feeling terminally unique, that it's, I know it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me because I'm different. I'm too broken.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear someone, and were you driving the motorcycle or were you on the motorcycle?
No, it was my Harley. I was driving home from work.
Okay. So
I'm like,
it's
no, I don't ride on the back.
so you've
I'm
always
like, no.
no, no, you've always been a badass.
No, I think tomboy. Like I was always like one of the guys,
Mm-hmm.
growing up, and to this day still love a good challenge. If somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm like, oh really? Watch me. You know, just like the other day, my daughter was like, oh mom, you're too old for TikTok. I was like, oh, I am getting on TikTok today.
So did you have brothers? Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
You were telling me about, okay. So this is like, and I don't know how comfortable you are talking about this part of your life, because we're talking to, I think it's important for our listeners, but Amberly, when you see her and you see her website, you see her TED Talks, right? And look at her beautiful smile and you're like, wow, look at this woman, so accomplished. And even in your story, which was this commitment to succeed and achieve and be the best, And you come from addiction. You come from, a lot of trauma, a lot of addiction, a family of addiction. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with your brothers and how that all kind of has played a role in who you are.
Well, it's you can grow up with the same parents in the same household and make a few different decisions and have a completely different life. And fortunately for me in school, I was a overachiever, I think you could say. In fact, they nominate you for Miss Greenville High School and class favorite, and most likely to succeed and all that. And there was like 13 nominations. And the teacher called my mom and said, well, Amberly has won every category. She can only choose two. Which ones does she want? And so I'm not saying that to like, oh, I'm bragging. I'm saying I had no idea it was an addiction. I wanted to make the best grades and do the best. And that was only because I felt so shitty inside. And so that was my way of feeling better. Whereas my brothers went down a different road and they started drinking, which led to drugs. And now my baby brother still went that route and unfortunately didn't get any help. And he sits on death row in Texas. My older brother is in and out of jail. He's sober for a little bit, and we can try to guide them with steps or to a meeting or to a rehab, and he's been to rehab. But if someone's not willing to do the work and really commit to it and really have a spiritual connection and ask God to help them through this, that's how I got through it, then it's not going to work. It has to be the most important thing in your life because it's life or death. It does not show it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to any of us. I mean, who am I to say I couldn't have gone down that road and be in and out of jail? I just luckily knew, like, this is not the life for me. I don't want this life. This is not the road I want to go down. And so, like I said, addiction does not discriminate. And you never know how much someone is struggling or what somebody's going through or what they're covering up with a smile. And so I think that's why it's so important just to be kind.
Growing up when I was a kid, my sisters and I had, this common trauma between us, right? That drove us in one way or another, like you were talking about here. For my sister, it drove her to hyper overachiever success from the gate, right? And for me, it drove me into victimization and self-pity and addiction ultimately, right? Where it was my parents' marriage, it was my mother's religion, it was my father's machismo. There was so much fighting and so much dysfunction, so much toxicity in the house. I never felt safe, and I never looked forward to being somewhere. Like I struggled in school, so I hated going to school. I struggled making friends, so I wasn't looking forward to even hanging out with my friends to go to school. And then coming home, it was like, I wonder what's going to happen today.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what's going to happen at the house. I wonder what my dad's going to do. And my dad was also an alcoholic. So, heavy mood swings. My mother's bipolar, all of that. It was it contributed to what happened to us in our lives. Was there a time, and we've had plenty of time to process that between us, right? And it's also brought us closer together. Was there that common element for you and your brothers where you guys were able to either reconcile or recognize it between you guys? Did it make a difference?
No, I grew up in a family where it was like, let's just not talk about the big elephant in the room. Let's pretend like everything is okay. I never felt safe because I basically lived with a predator. And, you know, he was horrible physically, beat my little brother. He was a big guy. And my oldest brother used to use me as a punching bag. And so we've talked about that. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I used to beat the crap out of you. And I was like, well, hey, it taught me to defend myself, taught me to like do Krav Maga when I was able to move out of the house and do Muay Thai. And so I think that everything that happens, you can use it to either let it define you and choose to be a victim and label yourself as your victim of that, this happened or that. Or you can go, okay, well, what can I do to make my life better despite these circumstances? And so my family, we didn't talk about a lot. It wasn't until I was 23 years old and I had not told anyone about my stepfather and the abuse except for my husband at the time. And in an alcoholic rage, he called my mother and said, do you know what your husband did to my wife? And I was, he knew he couldn't do anything else to hurt me. He had already like knocked me, like mentally, emotionally, just verbally in every way. He couldn't do, I was broken. I was broken. And so he could hurt my mom. And so he told her that. And thank God he told her and thank God my mom, got on the phone and talked to me. And she said, did that really happen? And I couldn't even answer her. She said, well, I guess that means yes. And she went, and my mom is like the sweetest, like Southern belle. And she went and she told me she punched my stepdad. He was in a deep sleep on the couch and she punched him as hard as she could. And she said, is it true what you did to Amberly? And all those years, I thought he would deny it. And he didn't deny it. And the next day, my mom got on a plane and came to California. And when she got back to Texas, he was gone. And he left her with a disabled child and my little sister, who was only 13 at the time, and forever couldn't find him. He ended up living an hour from me here in California, and he died of testicular cancer about 4 years ago.
Ooh. Wow, some poetic.
Karma's a
Yeah, I was
bitch,
about to say
man.
some poetic justice right there, man. I was like,
Sorry.
I'll let her say it first. Right, exactly. I was like, ooh, I know what it feels like, right? Like there's a part of you that just wants to hear that.
Well,
Yeah.
for so long, I would think, oh my God, I think, he would call me and leave me a creepy phone call, or he constantly made me feel stalked, or I would think that I saw him. He was a private investigator. And I would think, being in California, I would think that I saw him. And then to come and find out that he died and he lived an hour from me, now out of all the places to live, he chose to live an hour from me. So maybe it was him those times that I saw him. And so, and growing up, I was taught not to listen to my gut. And my sobriety has taught me to always trust my gut.
Yes. Yes.
Your
Yes.
gut never lies.
I now do a weekly group coaching call. And the way I start each call is like everyone on here can be a coach. You have 3 skill sets, 2 that you already have and just need to develop them, and then 1 that you need to develop. And the first one is your ability to hold space for someone else. And anybody can do that. It is a skill you have to practice. Active listening, right? Holding space for someone. But the second thing you have to do is really cultivate and connect with your intuition, because we all have it. We have a guidance system within us. And you know this because most of the time when somebody is struggling with something, most of the time you know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know the suggestion. However, if it was you going through the same thing, you don't know what to do. You have an internal guidance, and since we all do, follow that gut, follow that inner voice inside you, because really, when you go to a coach, that's all we're trying to do is we're trying to get you to listen to that voice inside of you that knows the truth, that knows the next
Mm-hmm.
step. And the third thing is you learn how to ask good questions. That's what you learn how to do. So, wow, I mean, this is where I was trying to get to. Thank you for being vulnerable and open, because this is a tough story, man. And people are listening to this right now and going, I know what that feels like. I know what it
Mm-hmm.
feels like to have something happen to me that robs me of my peace, robs me of my dignity, of my self-respect, of my self-worth. And I don't know what to do with this. I don't know who to go with this. I don't know who to trust. And who knows where you'd be if you hadn't talked to your ex-husband and he got the ball rolling. So I have to believe that,
Out of
universe,
bad things,
yeah,
sometimes good
good
things
things happen,
happen.
right? We have to trust and have faith. And more
Mm-hmm.
importantly, we go back and we circle back to that conversation about having the right people in your life, because when you have the right people in your life, it doesn't matter what happened to you. You can talk to them about it. You can
Mm-hmm.
share, hey, you know what? I've never told anybody this, but I feel like I feel compelled to tell you, whoever you is.
But at the time, I didn't feel that way. I felt like I had shared my deepest, darkest secret with the only person that I could trust, and he betrayed me. And it took
Mm,
me a long time to get over that and see it for what it was.
mm,
Sometimes the gift that comes out of a circumstance, it reveals itself much later, and so it also takes a lot of patience and trusting that everything will work out as it should. um, but I also love something that Brene Brown says, and she says make sure you share from a scar and not an open wound when you're sharing, like in like I'm sharing here on your show, or on social media, or I'll give you an example of that. So like I told you earlier, my daughter was like, oh, you're too old for TikTok. I was like, oh, I'm going to get on TikTok. I put my tap shoes on for the first time since the accident. Didn't know if I could tap dance again. I got on there, recorded for 15 seconds, tap danced, and I was like, oh my God, I can still dance. I was filled with joy. I'm like, I'm going to upload it. What do I have to risk? I don't have any followers. What do I care? You know? And little did I know that that video would go viral. It has thousands of comments. And if I would have shared that from a place of still feeling wounded, I really wouldn't have been able to handle some of the comments, because I'm in shorts and I'm in attached shoes and you see all my scars and it looks pretty gnarly. And so I can hear some of that stuff and laugh, and hear some of those comments and go, yeah, it's kind of like a science experiment, or yeah, my calf is actually in the front of my leg now, or you know what I mean? And it's kind of like how in sobriety we can heal and then move forward and laugh at situations, things that we did in the past where we used to feel shame about those things, and it gives you a sense of freedom. But I think it's real important to pick someone that you can really trust, that has a that can hold space for you and has your best interest. And as you feel a little bit more confident and a little bit more secure, and that you've healed a little bit more, then you can share openly about it. But I don't think I would have been able to do anything like that had I not first shared it with someone that I trusted, and then healed from that when I felt betrayed and learned to trust someone else. And and so I think it's baby steps, one step at a time, that you're able to get through those situations.
yeah, no, we're talking a vast difference from being vulnerable with someone you trust in public speaking. Okay. So I get what Brene is talking about. And this is when I got coached to speak. It was that exact message. You cannot share from the victim role. Okay.
Mm-mm.
You have to share from the warrior, from the person who's overcome, from the scar, and not from the open wound, because the message is going to get drowned out by the emotional distress.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is not about going public. This is not about Facebook. This is not about, TikTok. This is about, I have something that has been preventing me from being me, from allowing me to grow or become the person that I was always intended to be, because I haven't been able to share something that has brought me a tremendous amount of shame. And so this is a private moment. It's kind of like having a sponsor, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
someone that I trust, or I develop this trust relationship with, and say, there is something that I need to share about that I've never shared with anyone. And I can no longer carry this burden on my own. And it's one of the most life-changing things that I've seen happen for people, is their ability to allow someone else to carry the burden with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is something that's very, it's delicate, because you need to find the right person, right? It just can't be
It
anyone.
does have to be the right person.
That's the key.
Yeah, it is. And when you can share that pain, it divides that pain, but it does. You're so right. It has to be the right person. And man, when you find someone that you can trust with your most vulnerable, darkest secrets or shame, that's a gift. That has changed my life.
So true. So true. So take us to a burning boat moment in your life, a moment where you made a decision that you were no longer going to tolerate this, whatever this is, one more day, one more hour, one more minute. What was that moment for you?
Mm. When I wasn't going to tolerate the
Something.
addiction.
Nope. That's why I don't give a specific. I want to know when you decided to burn the boats, when you were going to take the island or die. So when did you make a decision that I'm not going to tolerate this, whatever that is, in my life?
Oh, there's been so many things. I would probably say one of the biggest decisions, though, was when I decided to do the scariest thing I've ever done, and that was to admit that I had a problem and I couldn't help myself and I couldn't stop. And it was the day that I reached out to someone that I knew was in a 12-step program. And I said, I need help. And they said, okay, I got you. I'm going to take you to a meeting. And I didn't hear back from them. And about a week later, I thought, I think I'm going to die. No, I need help now. And that's when I was like, okay, I got to Google and I got to get somewhere quick. I need help. And so the reason I share that is because the first person maybe you might reach out to, maybe they're not capable or able to help you. Everybody has busy lives and we can't take that personally. We just have to want so desperately to change our lives and use that desperation as a gift, as something that's going to spur us along to get to where we need to be. And so for me, I was like, I don't care what it takes. I have got to do whatever I can because I just want to feel better. I want to be better. And so I think it was that moment in my life. And it was the scariest thing I've ever done, but it was the best thing I've ever done.
What it feels like to me is that the toughest thing you've ever had to do throughout your life is be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of that comes from, growing up with my stepfather. There were a lot of times besides the sexual abuse, he would try to break me down and he would just do and say the most horrible things until I would cry. And then when I would cry, he would smile and say, I gotcha. And so it was really like a trigger for me that I will never let anyone see me cry. I will not break down. I'm going to be tough. And so for a long time, I remember I was about 25 years old, 26 years old, and I hadn't cried in, oh God, over 10 years for sure. And I was running through the airport, and just as I'm getting to the gate, the gate closed, and I missed my plane, and I dropped all my luggage and I started crying. And I think my daughter was like 5 at the time. She looked up at me and she said, "Mama, I didn't know you knew how to cry."
Wow.
And I was like, wow, I didn't either. And when I got sober and I started getting real and accepting what was going on in my life, and being gentle with myself as I was letting all these emotions come up to the surface, I cried just about every day, you know. Sometimes it surprises me when tears come up, and I don't, before I'd beat myself up about it and call myself weak or worthless or all these awful things. And now I'm just like, oh, good. Those are some healing tears. Let's let that out. Let's do a little bit of soul cleansing here, And so now living with a retired lieutenant commander, and then my daughter, bless her heart, she may need some therapy when she gets older. He's always like, "Suck it up, Ruby. Don't cry. Why are you crying?" And I'm like, "Girl, you just cry. You let it out. Just let it out." And so it's always like, there's a quite a bit of difference in how we parent, but we somehow find a way to meet in the middle.
It's so important. The messaging is so important. It's so important. We are born with the ability to soothe ourselves. And at some point, you don't tell a baby to stop crying. You don't tell a baby, to man up, right? It's only when they're able, which sucks, but it's only when they're cognitively able to understand those words that it's actually said. Otherwise, it's okay, baby. It's all right. It's going to be okay. And you soothe them and you love them and you nurture them and you allow them to process. You allow them to
Mm-hmm.
cry and throw a tantrum and then get to a point where they work through it, through the crying and through the tantrum. They work through it, and then they soothe themselves, and before you know it, they're taking a nap. And so we have been, it's been taken away from us. It's been taken away from many of us, that this idea that you don't cry. And the thing is that that's what we were born with, our ability to process trauma and pain is through tears and through anger and through tantrums and through
Mm-hmm.
we know what to do instinctively. And when someone says don't do that, we're actually fighting against the natural inclinations that we have to heal and soothe.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's super important whenever I hear that to just, you know, make that point, that it's so important to do that, to allow ourselves to, I don't care how old you are, if you need to throw a tantrum, throw a damn tantrum. Be angry, process that through, let it go, let it out, cry. Crying is such a beautiful thing. And you're like me, I was just like you for so many years. It wasn't a tear that was going to be shed because I was told boys don't cry.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I started crying, man, there was no stopping me. All right. So, Amberly, if our listeners want to reach out to you, want to know more about you, how can they find you?
AmberlyLago.com. I've got everything there. I hang out a lot on Instagram at Amberly Lago Motivation. Now, hey, you can see me on TikTok too. I'm having fun over there. And then I have a podcast called True Grit and Grace Podcast. And then, of course, my book is True Grit and Grace, and you can find that on Amazon or at your favorite bookstore, if you can find a bookstore open.
Right. Yeah. I've heard that a couple of times on my interview so far. So, two more questions. What is the best suggestion or advice you have ever received?
I would say listen to your gut. Listen to your gut because your gut knows.
Yes.
And you know right away. You know
Yes.
whether it's a yes or no. You know what to do. Just listen to your gut. Because people can try to tell you things, people will try to persuade you, but it's so important to listen to your gut. And the more you listen to it and you start to trust yourselves or trust yourself, then you can start to build confidence that you do know the way, that you can trust yourself in your gut. So I think that's really important. Just and keep it simple. I try to complicate things. I'll start and I'm like, no, keep it simple. Just keep it simple.
Beautiful advice. Wonderful advice. And what is one parting piece of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think no matter what your circumstances are, no matter even if your circumstances have narrowed your possibilities, that you can get through anything with grit and grace.
What a beautiful way to close. Love it.
Oh, thank you. You're so awesome.
Stop it.
You are.
Thank you.
I have a feeling we could talk all day.
Yeah. No, it feels like we're just warming up.
Yeah, I tell you what, there's some things that I'm like, oh my gosh, there's that are surprising when you start to think about things,
Mm-hmm.
or it, like you said, it's all the questions that you ask, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yeah, where did that come from? That came from here, and then you get a
Mm-hmm.
little, yeah,
That's what you got to do. Well, we could continue this on your podcast.
yeah, let's do that.
Okay. All right. It's a date. It's a date.
State. I would love to have you on because it's all about struggles to success. And I think if you look it up in the dictionary, you are definitely struggle to where you are now and so successful, and you're helping so many people. And thank you for all that you do to really give people light and hope and the confidence and the tools to keep moving forward. So thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you, Amberly. After, just getting to know you, we're probably, our pictures would both be under that, under that category. It's the struggle that makes the story. It's the struggle that makes us who we are. It's without it, we can't really appreciate all the wonderful things that we have in our lives today, including our children and our family, right? It's that,
Mm-hmm.
and that true grit. And while we're at it, I'll give a shout out to Steph Coffee, who put us together.
Oh,
She's
yeah, I'm going to meet her right now. We're meeting at the park right now, 6 feet apart.
good. Well, I want to thank her. Really appreciate this incredible connection that you've made for us. And thanks again. Thanks
Yes,
again.
thank you. Yes, and thank you, Stephanie. I love you. Thank you so much, Omar.
All right, folks, we've now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida. Did I say that well? Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the SHAIR Podcast. And be sure to click subscribe to the SHAIR Podcast YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on all the major social media platforms. Go to our website, the SHAIR Podcast. Go to my website, omarpinto.com. Find out about joining the SRC, the SHAIR Recovery Community, or one-on-one coaching with me by setting up a free consultation. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week on the following SHAIR Podcast episode.